Occasionally when cutting for suits and trousers, you'll find that you're quite tight on cloth. So something that can be done is pushing the fork of the backside of the trouser off of the cloth, and essentially what you need to do then is put on a crotch piece, which is what this video is. And that way everything else can be cut out properly. And it's very simple, even more so if you don't have an overlocker. Just skip the overlocking if you don't have an overlocker, as one might expect. I will caveat though that it can be disappointing to receive a pair of trousers with a fork piece, or a brand new pair of trousers with a fork piece. And as you can see, there isn't necessarily one visible here. However, if a small one needs to be added to extend the inlay, then that means the trouser, if the trouser needs to be let out, it can be, and if that exposes the forepart, then they're not brand new anymore. But there it is. You might not be able to see the seam there, but a part of the overlocking and the selvage can still be seen. So, starting with my underside trouser, we should only put a fork piece onto the back trouser. I have a little bit of extra cloth that I'm going to sew onto it. If the trouser was cut on the fold, then we only measure 1 centimeter from the raw edge. If it was cut on the selvage, like this, then we can pick a point to be the sew line. But we don't want the selvage ID showing, so we will need to cut the new raw edge less than 1 centimeter from the usable cloth. You can see here that the seam allowance of the fork piece isn't going to interfere with the inseam at the fork, which would cause a lot of layers to start overlapping, which is why I'd prefer to avoid it when I can. The underside should mostly be mark stitched before the piece goes on. If there's a pattern, then we might want to line up any checks or stripes. The raw edges where the underside and fork pieces get sewn together are overlocked by themselves first. What I always prefer to do, and what a lot of people prefer to do, is keep the right side of the cloth facing up when it goes through the overlocker. It keeps the visible overlocking consistent. The appropriate pieces going together, right side to right side, they get sewn with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. They don't necessarily need to be back-tacked, since afterwards they will be trimmed and overlocked together anyway. Waffles. Firmly press the seams open. Lay the undersides back on top of one another, lining up the edges and the mark stitches again. If the inseam and the seat seams extend into the fork piece, then the chalk lines need to be put onto the fork. Then the inlay needs to be trimmed to match. Otherwise, the inlay just needs to be trimmed to match. At the appropriate interval, like right now, the rest of the trouser will be overlocked on the inseam and the seat seam, and it's important that the seam allowances remain open and are overlocked flat. After this point, there is no change in construction at all. So if you're ever tight on cloth now, you might be able to get by. Myself, I don't dislike doing the fork piece, I don't dislike having one, because it doesn't look like it's not supposed to be there. In my opinion, it fits in. Though it's up to you, and if you're short on cloth, then you may be able to get by anyway as well.